Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is training, and we're going to talk about muscle growth despite nerve damage. So this was actually, I just worked with a client. I've worked with clients in many times over where this has been an issue, but I actually just got done with a client session in which this nerve damage concept came up. And I thought it would be kind of a fun podcast to kind of geek out on the unique, neat little nuances of training and exercise selection. So the fun part of this would be is to see how you can create muscle damage when a muscle strength is limited, meaning there's some issue with the joint in some way where you can't load it very heavy. There's issues with the muscle, such as nerve damage, or other issues. Maybe you're recovering or rehabbing from a partial tear or a tendon tear, connective tissue tear, something like that. There are going to be cases in which you may be limited to how heavy you can train, but you still want to create muscle growth to not only create stimulus for repair, but also to progress. So this would be a cool example of one technique concept I used. There's many different concepts. So, but the one I used today was a pump stretch concept. And I've done this a bunch of times over. There's many other concepts. This one just worked well because the client hadn't been doing this concept in their own training. So it was a nice kind of unique way. So when they came in, this is the beauty of knowing all of this stuff, is I didn't know what they were coming to do. So whenever they said they came and they wanted to work on chest, I found out during that, like when they said that statement to me, and then we had an hour to do a chest workout. So it helps to know these concepts ahead of time, so that way you can kind of just apply the concept with whatever equipment you have available. So if I went to 10 different gyms, there might be 10 different types of equipment available, but if I know the concept of a pump stretch method to create muscular damage that doesn't require heaviness. Okay, so this is a muscular damage technique that if you don't need heaviness. So pump stretch concepts. We're going to explain that. And then the neat thing is, if you know the concept, you can apply it with any exercises. So I'll give you the exercises we did today, and then even give you an example that you can do at pretty much any commercial gym with cable crossovers. But it's something where if you play with it, the more fun you have with it, the more kind of nuances and weird ways you can use this. And it's really, really, really fun to develop and kind of play around with and build upon unique ideas. So let's get into it. So the client is getting ready for the Arnold Classic Amateur, and they've competed before. They look great. They ran into a nerve issue about 6 to 9 months ago. I'm not really sure what caused it. They just said they just started kind of like not being able to feel their chest contract very well. They started running into lat issues. They actually have some underdevelopment in their lat related to like their teres major and lower lat area. So the musculature that's on the bottom portion of their shoulder blade area. So they have some growth inadequacies, I guess would be in that area. And it's all tied into some type of impingement that they're having in their neck. So they got neck traction kind of device that they've been doing at home, and they've been doing this banded therapy stuff to help open up the nerve areas of the neck and cervical spine. So it's all kind of physical therapist, doctorish stuff approved. So it's not done. It might sound scary or crazy that they're doing it every day at home on their own, but this person actually is a personal trainer. They've trained other people for contests, so they know what they're doing, and this is all approved things. So I've helped him with competitions before. Helped him with training before, and he's a client of mine off and on whenever he needs it for various things. So this example came up where, since he's getting ready for the Arnold Amateur, he wanted to kind of meet and maybe do some chest and back workouts over the next, 2 months or so, and really kind of hammer home whatever he can get out of the tissues that are affected by that nerve issue. So our goal will be to work together, build up a library of concepts that he can use even after the competition. So he wants to learn it and get great intense workouts together, Then after the competition, he can just take all the concepts and kind of work through them on his own or with clients or whatever he wants to do with that. So just his knowledge for the rest of his life. He can do whatever he wants with it. So what we did, the idea of a pump stretch concept to create muscular damage is exactly what it sounds like, hence the easiness of the name, and I like easy names, is you want to do a movement. So we were doing supersets. And you don't have to actually superset two different movements. You can actually do a pump stretch concept within a single exercise. But we were doing two movements. And the first one was intended to create a pump effect, and we're going to expand on this here in a second. And then the second one is used to create a stretch. So if you pump a muscle up and get a bunch of blood into it, it feels shortened. Okay, it's pumped, it's tight, everything feels kind of like we want to go show off our muscles at the beach, kind of thing. Then, if you place the muscle under a stretch, especially a weighted stretch, a loaded stretch, you will actually create muscle damage because the muscles will not want to stretch and get to the thin position they have to be in to be stretched with all of the contents of the blood and water and whatnot that they have in it. So you actually will cause a shearing force on the muscle to create muscular damage. And it's unrelated to how heavy of the weight you're using. It's actually because the pump is in there. So rather than having something really heavy pulling and tearing at the muscle, you actually just have the muscle really freaking pumped up like it's super duper tight, and then all of a sudden you start pulling on it, and that creates muscular damage. So this is a great technique because you don't have to have anything heavy. So you just need heavy enough. And typically, if you think of weight loads, this might be something like you're at like maybe 50 to 75% of your normal weight load, and that's plenty in terms of enough weight in the stretched exercise or a stretched position to create the muscular damage that you want. So the first exercise pairing we used was an isometric squeeze on a PVC pipe. So some of these stuff you guys aren't going to be able to do on your own. Actually, none of these, now that I'm looking at them. But that's why we're talking about the concepts and why I want to give you an example at the end you can use. So for now, just have fun listening to the craziness and weirdness of what we do here at Brutal Iron Gym. So we have a PVC pipe that's roughly about 4 feet long, and we have different thicknesses of ones in terms of like diameters. So we have one that I believe is about, say, maybe 14 inches, maybe 16 actually inches wide. Then we have one that's maybe 12, then one that's 8, something like that. So we use the wide one, about 16 inches wide. We set it on end, straight up in the air, so like vertically, not horizontal, but vertical, at the end of the bench. So he was sitting at the end of the bench, and the pipe was standing upright, basically in between his feet. We had him go to a almost arms fully extended position, so the elbows are slightly bent, and the elbows are flared out. So the point of the elbow is flared out to the sides rather than down to the ground. So the elbows are pointing out to the sides, and then he tries to crush the pipe. Now the pipe is something you would use like under roads in construction for drainage. So you ain't ever going to crush this damn thing. So he was squeezing as hard as he could, trying to crush the pipe inward, and he was doing that for 10 seconds. What that does is if you do an isometric contraction where you continually try to contract harder and harder and harder, you can actually recruit a greater degree or a greater number of muscular fibers than you would typically be able to recruit within like a normal weighted exercise. So isometrics are awesome at fiber recruitment in terms of activation. So he was squeezing the shit out of the pipe as hard as he could and continuing to squeeze it. Not just like he was holding the squeeze, he was continuing to try to gain on the squeeze. And he was doing that for a slow 10 count. We would then immediately grab dumbbells. So we literally had them right next to him. So he would grab the dumbbells, lay back in position, and we did a 15-degree incline, and he did dumbbell chest presses, where he came down to a full stretch. He kept the back squeeze, and he stretched in the chest stretch. He didn't just totally let go of all bracing and dump the weight into a front delt stretch. So he kept his proper bracing with lats, kept his back squeezed together, like shoulder blades squeezed together, did a normal dumbbell press, but he didn't shortchange the bottom of the motion, which most people do. So we had him get a nice full range of motion. We even gave his hands an upper arm angle instead of a kind of a flared out 90-degree angle, like you're holding onto a barbell. We used a 60-degree angle. So that way it was a little bit more friendly on the front delt. It allowed him to actually find the exact fibers that are affected negatively in his chest due to the nerve damage. So his right side of the chest is the one that's affected, and it's actually not his entire pec. It's actually just kind of the upper portion that's affected. So we found a hand angle, upper arm angle, and the 15-degree angle that all made it specific to the exact fibers that he was having issues with. So then we loaded it with just 40-pound dumbbells. So he was just doing 40-pound dumbbells for sets of 8 to 10. Now, normally this is somebody you could press like, 80s to 100s. So with the nerve damage, he hasn't been able to be his best. So typically he had been doing in his own workouts about 40s for like 8 to 10 reps. So we just kept that concept. We fine-tuned the position exactly to the strands that he needed to be using. And we did the isometric stimulation, the priming of the PVC pipe before the presses. So basically what happened was, by him trying to crush the hell out of that PVC pipe, it activated more of the fibers of his chest, and it would make his brain kind of like having to fire and find those fibers. Because if he was crushing the pipe for 10 seconds, the body would have thought he wanted the pipe to smash. So it would have fired some fibers and then said, oh shit, the pipe isn't crushing, fire more. Oh man, the pipe isn't crushing, fire even more. And it would have had to start kind of trying to ask those damaged fibers to fire. So therefore they were already being talked to. Then when we laid down into the dumbbell presses, his body was already aware that those fibers existed then and was calling upon them better during the dumbbell presses. So he even remarked that the dumbbell presses felt better in his chest because we had added that isometric squeeze. Okay. So then we did 5 working sets of that. So 1 or 2 warm-ups, 5 working sets. We then went into what's called plate presses. So it's almost like you just hold a 45-pound plate over your chest and you press it up and down. So it's a neutral gripped press. But we have a peg that you can load specifically for multiple plates, but still have finger room to grab and hold the plate safely. So you can stack, if you wanted to, you could actually stack one single plate, have spacing for your fingers to hold onto that plate, lip it around, like fingers around the lip, so that way you can pick it up off the ground, put it back on the ground safely. And since everything's being clipped into a center peg, you can actually stack up to 4 other 45s above that one. So you could actually be doing, 225 pounds basically? So you could be pressing with that if you wanted to. It's actually pretty damn hard. So 225 pounds might not sound heavy, but it is when you do it in this position. So by having the peg there and clips in certain positions, he was able to handle it easily for loading it and unloading it up and on off himself for different pressing, for the pressing sets. So we did that. It was a neutral grip, but not restrictively narrow. Sometimes people have done dumbbell presses where they pin 2 dumbbells together. That's so damn narrow that you get restricted in wrist flexion and movement. And it also is so narrow that the dumbbells almost fall into each other. And your body's trying harder to kind of push them together than it is to actually press them. And it kind of confuses the contractile forces of the muscle. So we found that pressing plates actually is a better recruitment of the chest compared to pinning dumbbells together. Now that one was a shortened position, so you can't use a full range of motion. So it was a great way for an inner chest pump. Since it was a neutral grip and the hands were only about as wide as a 45-pound plate, those 2 factors are going to cause it to be more stimulus on the inner chest, and especially being a shortened position, meaning it's not a big full range of motion, you can't get a big stretch. So that was the inner chest that was going to get pumped up. Then, during the dips, we did machine-assisted dips. Since he's damaged in his chest tissue, he can't do his normal like body weight and whatnot. So we used an assisted dip machine, and that was going to pull the pump back open. So for the first superset, we had the PVC pipe isometric squeezes, then the dumbbell chest presses. The isometric squeezes, they're not a shortened range of motion movement. They literally are no range of motion because they're isometrics. But it would have fired off all of the muscles and made the muscles very active and aware. And they actually would get a pump. So they would get a pump from the isometric effect, and then we were going to do the dumbbell press. The isometric actually improved muscle recruitment awareness, and then we loaded it and made it do contractile forces. the PVC pipe also created a pump effect, which then loaded in the dumbbell presses was stretching open that pump, creating the muscle damage we want. So we got better muscle recruitment during the presses, which caused more damage, and we got the pump stretched open, which caused more damage than just doing regular dumbbell presses on their own. So the second superset, when we did the plate press, we did machine assisted dips. The plate press was the pump. It shortened the muscle into a pumped position, almost like you had a big chest pump and you were like flexing it on stage. Then we did those dips, which pulled that pump open. So it would have pulled across the chest into the inner chest. And what that does is that create the damage through the fibers that we were trying to get to the upper chest. And then also it wears out the outer chest, which then decreases its ability to help on the plate press in subsequent sets. So every single set we did, it got more and more and more effective. So we actually did 5 working sets of that as well. Then the third grouping we did was spring bar isometrics into elevated push-ups. So our spring bar is a barbell that has sliding handles on the shaft. So the barbell shaft, they are sliding handles that go in and out, and we have them against springs. So spring resisted. So you have to actually push the handles together like a chest fly. You have to push the handles together against the compression force of the spring. So which we figured is about a 30 to 40 pound pressure. So it's like you're doing a 30 to 40 pound chest fly while you're pressing a barbell. So you have if you're laying down flat, on a flat bench, you have a horizontal force as well as a vertical force. You have the horizontal force of pushing the handles together on the bar, but you have a vertical force of the weight of the bar. And you could even add plates if you wanted to as well. So this is a dual force. You have a horizontal and vertical force, so dual vector force, whatever the hell the terminology would be. It just kicks your muscles' ass. That's basically how it works. So you have to compress the springs together as you're also pressing up. That gets a fuller contraction of the chest rather than just having a normal barbell chest press where the hands stay the same width the whole time. So the chest contracts the upper arm bone across the body. That's what it does. So if I have fixed hand width, I'm only going to get a limited contractile force of the chest. You're going to get a lot of chest involved, but it's not a full contraction. Whereas as you press, if your hands become closer together, you can bring your elbow pits closer together, your upper arm bones closer together, and you get a further degree of contraction out of the chest. So he was doing those where as he was pressing up, he would contract into the springs, and we held the contraction for a 3 count. Then as he pressed back down to his chest, he would let go of the spring force. And then he would press back up and add in the spring force again by closing his hands. So this was an on-off contraction force for the horizontal force, but it was a constant force for the vertical force. So lots and lots and lots of muscle annoyance to that one. And the benefit of it is we also had him doing this on a slight decline so he could change his positioning to find the upper chest and get it more active. Okay. He then went into elevated push-ups, and we did these on a machine called a Hurricane, a Sorinex Hurricane. And all you have to really know about that is it has elevated handles, and it allows you for variability of handle angle. So since they're elevated, we could get into a further stretch in the push-ups. So we held the bottom of each push-up for a 3 count. So we went to the bottom, we went 1, 2, 3, up. Then he went back down, 1, 2, 3, up. So we did each rep like that. And then since the hand angles are optional, you can change them to whatever angle we needed to hit the tissue fibers that we wanted. So again, since this was specific to only one area of his chest, we wanted to make sure everything we did targeted that area. So that's what we were doing. So the spring bar isometrics on-off contractions create a huge pump. And then the stretched elevated push-ups obviously were the stretch. So we did 3 supersets. 5 working sets of each, where we did a pump style exercise into a stretch style exercise. And 2 of the 3 supersets involved also just increasing nerve connectional feel, kind of mind muscle feel for those muscle fibers by asking a greater degree of recruitment in the muscle fiber, firing kind of the numbers of the fibers that fired. So this is a really cool concept, the pump stretch effect. that you can create muscle damage. So we added in, just because I like layering things and I like having something to think of. So while I'm training somebody, I added in the nerve kind of excitatory factors of the isometrics, but you don't have to do that. It was just something I thought was cool to do. So, but we did PVC pipe squeezes into dumbbell presses. Then we did plate presses into machine-assisted dips. Then we did spring bar isometrics into elevated push-ups. So he got his chest absolutely rocked and destroyed with a bunch of fun, cool things. So he got to do fun new things, which is fun. He got to do a pump stretch concept. So even though he couldn't go heavy, we still got a lot of muscle damage. And we did 2 of the 3 supersets involved a neurological element to where it would increase his nerve recruitment, which may help speed up his recovery from the nerve damage. Cool. Now, how can you guys use this? Is you can use cable crossovers, and you can actually just do, instead of a full range of motion, you would do 10 to 20 reps of just the inner portion of the motion. So if you think from having your hands in a full stretch to then closing your hands all the way, okay, a full range of motion of a normal cable crossover. Just do the final 1/3 of the contraction. So you have your hands touching, okay, like your knuckles touching against the weight in a full contraction. Open up to where your hands are only about 12 to 16 inches apart, and then squeeze back together. Open up till they're about 12 to 16 inches apart, squeeze back together. So you're actually just going to do kind of that last 1/3 of the contraction. You're going to do that for 10 to 20 reps. That creates an enormous pump within the muscle. Then go ahead and do full range of motion reps, and you can even pause in the full stretch position for a 2 count. So what that does is once you have the muscle already pumped up, you're then going to increase to a full range of motion and actually even holding the stretch, and that's going to pull that pump back open. So you can even do this with bicep curls. Just curl the top half of the motion, okay, for 20 reps, then curl the full range of motion for 10 to 20 reps. So you just basically do a final piece of the contraction followed by a full contraction. This isn't 100% always accurate in every exercise, but it's a pretty good place to start. So start with cable crossovers and bicep curls, and you'll feel that if you get the muscle pumped and then you try to pull it open under a weighted loaded stretch, you're going to get a lot more muscle damage than just a normal repetitional effort that most people do in their workouts. So, the reason why I thought this was interesting, and hopefully I didn't talk insanely too fast, although I know I talked really fast because there's a lot of information to get through, and I get fired up and I love this kind of stuff. So, the fun part would just be to see that you can do a lot of weird, fun, unique nuances in your training and make things insanely specific to whatever your needs are. Okay? And it's fun to know that even though you can't lift heavy, you can still get muscle growth and damage, no matter what the reason is for why you can't lift heavy. So it helps a lot, to be able to modify your training with different concepts that you can use in training to work with whatever you have that day in training. So, thought it was cool. I just thought it was something neat to maybe share. Hopefully this was interesting, just to kind of just see the different theories and ideas that are out there. So if anybody needs any help, like if you have some type of impaired recruitment in muscles, or if you're recovering from an injury, or if you have any issues where you can't go heavy and you're still wondering how to get results, reach out to us. So we do help people in person with movement therapy sessions and kind of like corrective therapy stuff like what we did today in this client's workout. And we also do it online as well, so if you don't live locally to us in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So, the help's there if you want it. Just email us at brutalironGym@gmail.com. We'll help you with some cool ideas. But I thought this would be fun just to kind of show off the newness and like nuances and weirdness that you can do in training. Cool. Okay, hopefully it was helpful. It was fun to at least explain. So thank you for listening. If you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. Also, if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. The podcast is for you, so we want to know what you want to learn about. You can tell us on our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening. And thank you for watching.